Okay, what is today?
26.
26th of July, 2001,
Right.
in the backyard of the Emerys at, what's your address?
807 Rittenhouse.
Right. On a beautiful morning.
It is that.
Yeah. And remember, this is painless. I'm going to start with, when did you guys first come up to Bayfield?
When did we first moved to Bayfield,
Yeah.
you mean? We came here, actually changed our address on May 1, 1976.
Uh-huh. So a little, 25 years.
Mm-hmm. We've been here 25 years.
Yeah.
Can you imagine anyone being retired that long?
That's great, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. You know, so many people they retire and they only have a few years.
See it all the time.
You've been lucky.
Yes, we are.
We're
Yeah.
very,
We're blessed. We're not lucky, we're blessed.
we appreciate it too.
But we do appreciate it.
And what brought you to Bayfield?
Pardon me?
What brought you to Bayfield?
Well, I think that both of us, in the first place, like most of the people who have come here under similar circumstances, fell in love with the town when they, as it was at that time. We had, our son went to Northland College, and he had been up here in the course of his 4 years down there. He'd been up here quite a good deal, and he was in love with Bayfield. And so when we came, we'd been up here a number of times. When we came to commencement, we came up here. He wanted to come to Bayfield, and we came up here. And we liked the place, and we started to look around for property. And we found a lake lot that we liked very much south of town here. And we bought that on the spur of the moment. Then built a house out there.
Now, where was
several
that?
years later. Pardon?
Where was that?
Do you know where Bob Boucher lives?
Yes.
That's the house.
Oh, okay.
And we lived there for what, 7 or 8 years,
8 years.
and then moved into town.
Now, why'd you move into town? Most people want to stay on the lake.
It's easier.
Right. Well, we love lake living. We had lived on a lake for 20 years before that, and White Bear Lake, and so water was pretty essential to us when we came up here. You get used to it. But it was pretty lonesome out there to begin with. We were the only full-time people who were right there. We had neighbors, the Beebes, Jim and Vadna Beebe, whom you remember.
Yep.
Lived south of us about a half a mile, and but it was kind of in an unprotected area. There's been a little bit of breaking in around us, and that was one of the reasons. Another was that we like to walk, and in the wintertime out there's just no place to walk, and so yeah, that attracted us to town. There are numerous things that can bring you to town after you've lived in the country a while. But those were some of the things.
Yeah.
It's much more convenient to be close to the shopping facilities and the post office and all those things than it is to live out in the country.
Now, where were you living before you moved to Bayfield?
At White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Actually, a suburb of White Bear Lake. I guess you'd call it a suburb, an adjoining community, we'll say. Birchwood, a little town of about 350 or 400 people. No business in the town, it's just purely a residential area.
Well, I'm going to back up further now. When did you guys meet and how?
Well, we met
I want both renditions here now.
in,
Think we should show him the picture?
pardon?
You think we should show him the picture afterwards when he gets through?
Yes, I'd like to see that.
I think you should.
Shall I go
I think
get it?
Should. Can you
that
stop?
Well, we
alright?
can put it on later.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this all began when I was invited down to visit one of my lawyer friends, the district attorney in one of the central Wisconsin counties, at a time that I was practicing law in Marshfield. And I was the city attorney down there. He invited me to come down for the weekend, and I was single, of course. He was married to a lovely girl and who had gone to school with Elizabeth. And she happened to be the county nurse. And they went to nursing school together in Madison.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I liked, her name was Bertha, and I liked Bertha a good deal. And I said to him aside, "Are there any more of these around?" And he said, "There just happened to be." And he went and he got the picture that you will see later. And I was pretty interested. So I got in touch with her and took her out to dinner a week or two later, and well, here we are.
So was it love at first sight?
As far as I was concerned, it was. And
How about you?
It took me a little while.
Yeah. Good to check him out.
Yeah,
Now, were you working as a nurse at that time?
yes.
Where?
I was working for the State Health Department, Wisconsin State Health Department,
Mm-hmm.
in
And-
the tuberculosis division. I worked with public health nurses on their programs in public health.
In which town?
I worked for the whole state.
she had the
Oh, you
whole
did?
state.
I
She was
worked
the
with-
state consultant nursing.
I see. So you traveled all over then? And you still roped her?
Yeah,
You followed her, huh?
that's right. I kept pretty close track of her.
Now, what year was this?
47.
1947. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We were
And,
married in
We were married in
1948.
1948 then.
and where were you married?
At Dodgeville, Wisconsin, on the farm where she was raised.
We
As a
were
matter of-
married in the room that I was born in.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Boy, that's continuity.
Yeah.
And where was that farm exactly?
Iowa County, west of Madison, about 40 miles.
Are you familiar with the Mineral Point in Dodgeville country?
I'm not.
It's a
So,
beautiful country.
so
and I
Dodgeville, and
told us
then
what-
which way from Dodgeville?
South, 3 miles south of Dodge.
Right. And what so your family were farmers there?
Yes.
What were their names?
Murrish, Murrish.
And what kind of a name is that? What's the ethnic?
Cornish.
Is that right?
I'm almost 3/4 Cornish. Cornish settled in the southwestern Wisconsin in the 1820s.
Yeah,
And,
late
and
1820s.
thereafter
Uh-huh.
to mine lead and zinc. Cornish people were good miners and known all over for their skill in mining. So they came to this Iowa County area, southwestern Wisconsin,
Uh-huh.
to mine lead and zinc. My great-grandfather was one of them. My grandmother came from Cornwall, was born there, and came when she was 12 years old.
And what were their names?
Sims, S-I-M-S.
What first names too?
Sarah was my grandmother. My great-grandfather was Matthew, and my grandfather was Thomas Sims.
Mm-hmm. So, were they settled in that same area around Dodgeville?
Yes, yes.
And on the same farm, or did they?
They
a
were
different
not
farm?
farmers.
They weren't farmers. Miners.
Well, my grandfather was. My grandfather was a funeral director.
Uh-huh. So he lived in town then?
Yes.
Yeah. And what about your parents? What were their names?
Jane Sims and Albert Murish.
And what kind of farming? Was it dairy?
Dairy and beef cattle.
So they would have come, they were born here then?
Yes.
And you said, when did your great-grandfather come over then from Cornwall?
I think in the 1820s.
That early?
Or was it? It might have been a little later than that. I was going
Yeah.
to look that up. Well, between 1820 and 1850 probably.
Right. Wonder why they selected that part of the world. They heard about it.
My grandmother's father came to mine. And I don't know why my grandfather came. Some of his family came from the Isle of Man, but I don't think he did.
Mm-hmm. So you're a long way from being a farm girl, and
Yeah, I lived as a farm girl for many years, milking cows and driving a team in the hay rack, and then I went to nursing school. And
did you miss it when you went off nursing?
Yes,
Yeah. I think it stays in your blood, doesn't it?
yes.
Although my mother, who grew up on a farm, wouldn't have anything to do with a farm at this point.
Oh,
It was
well,
too tough. It was too tough.
I wouldn't want to have to work there. I like to go back and visit.
Yeah. Is your family still have a part of that farm, or
No.
that's gone? Yeah. Right.
And since they left just recently, they have discovered artifacts that go back to the 1200 years
Is that right?
on that farm, and they're going through their making new roads through the part of the farm, and they had to do an archaeological study before they were allowed to proceed.
12,000 years.
Yeah, I mean 12,000 years, and not 1,200.
Is that right?
12,000 years.
Oh boy.
They're really, it's phenomenal. I think that that's where we played as kids. My father used to find arrowheads in the fields when he was plowing the fields.
Okay. What were you saying now?
Well, my father found arrowheads in the fields when he was working the fields. So we just thought they were Indians comparatively recently.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were.
And where did you go to nursing school then?
It was then called Madison General Hospital, but it now is called Meriter, and it's joined with another one. Then in 43, I went to or 41, I went to the University of Minnesota and took a bachelor's.
Mm-hmm.
And in 73, 30 years later, I took my master's
Is that right?
after our children were all in school.
Went
In school.
went back to school. It must not have been
University of Minnesota.
very easy to do.
It was tough. I should have gone sooner. But we did it.
And what drew you to nursing?
I don't know. It just appealed to me.
Mm-hmm. And you worked as a nurse or in the nursing field for how many years then?
I think it was 12 years.
And had children.
Yes.
Now, what are your children's names and
Richard and Mary.
where are they now?
They're in the Twin Cities, and they live from White Bear Lake, a very short distance from where they grew up. It's in the White Bear
Mm-hmm.
Coastal District.
And what do they do?
They're both lawyers.
They are.
And Mary is a nurse also.
Mm-hmm.
Mary works, she's a partner in a law firm in Minneapolis. And Dick is a patent attorney.
And they have children?
Mary has 3.
So you have 3 grandchildren.
Yes.
And what are their names?
Christopher, Molly, and Bill.
Now, when were your children born? What year? What year?
51 and 53.
Mm-hmm. We have to get all this down for the record, you know. And I imagine they come up and visit.
Yes. They love to come. They're both awfully busy.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to turn to you, Bob. And ask you about your family. Now, where were your ancestors from?
Well, they're Yankee for the most part, and that I suppose they're English and Scotch-Irish, a lot of them. I also have some Native American ancestors.
You do?
I'm a direct descendant of a woman by the name of Molly Brandt, whose brother, Thin Donagay, was the chief and a very celebrated one of the Mohawk tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm I'm quite proud of that royal blood. Her husband, common law husband, was a man by the name of Sir William Johnson. And if you think back to the French and Indian Wars and that period,
Mm-hmm.
he was very prominent. And in the Revolutionary War, he was not terribly active. He's been credited with activity that I think he probably wasn't quite guilty of, but he was not on the revolutionary side of things. He was a loyalist.
Hang on a second. I tell you, we're getting all kinds of racket here. We'll wait till he goes. Okay.
On my now that's on my mother's side. My father's people were, I think, just Yankee blood. The Emerys first came to this country in 1660, the first of them. There were 2 brothers who came together, John and Joseph. And all of us, I guess, go back to them.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that I know.
So the roots are deep there out in the East Coast then?
I beg your pardon?
The roots are deep then out in the East Coast in your family? Say the roots are deep.
Yes.
Yes. And then where did your grandparents or parents, where did they end up living?
Well, my parents wound up living in the state of Wisconsin. My mother was raised in northern Pennsylvania, in Tioga County, and my father was raised at Hornell, New York. across the line on north of ways,
Mm-hmm.
in upstate New York.
And what brought them to Wisconsin?
Well, my father was a Methodist minister, and the bishop brought him out here to become the pastor of a new church that they were building in Duluth. And that's how he happened to come out here. He was assigned to the church
Mm-hmm.
and had to wait while they were building the church. The family lived in, and he was interim pastor in a little church at Deer River, Minnesota. He was there for long enough for me to be born.
That's where you were born?
That's what I was.
Up in the woods?
That's right. A very primitive situation at that time.
And what about your mother?
Well, my mother was born and raised in northern Pennsylvania, and went to school there at Mansfield State Teachers College, which was not far from her home, and was throughout her life off and on a teacher quite a lot. She wound up at the last end of her life. She taught during the last 5 years or so, 5 or 10 years of her life, she was a teacher. Not 10, but
Mm-hmm.
a little more than 5.
But then what brought her to Wisconsin? Or had they met back east and then
Pardon?
they had already been married and then he got the job in Duluth?
That's right. The bishop sent him to Wisconsin.
I see.
And they went to Eau Claire, where
Uh-huh.
my father was minister of the First Methodist Church in Eau Claire.
And when you were born in Deer River, then what happened?
Well, they moved to Duluth. From there, when the church that was being constructed was done, they moved into Duluth, and he was pastor of that church. And then, as I say, the bishop moved into Eau Claire
Mm-hmm.
after a few years. And the rest of their lives, they were moved about. The Methodist Church has what they call the itinerant ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And the ministers move. They systematically, every 3 or 4 years, they pick them up, and once in a while you find one who's been around for 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
My father had a pastorate or two like that, but they were pretty long pastorates at that time. Most of them were 3 years. So they got moved around quite a lot.
So you moved around quite a lot then?
I beg your
As a
pardon?
child, you moved around
yes.
all over the
Ben.
place. Where did you go to high school then?
Well, I went to 4 different high schools.
You did?
I started high school at Superior East High School, where my parents were living at that time. And before I got much of a chance to get going, they got moved down to Spooner, where they needed my dad's services for some special things down there. And I was there for a year, moved to a little town by the name of New Lisbon for 2 years, where I had my 2nd and 3rd years of high school, and then moved to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, where I graduated next year.
Well, that must not have been easy.
No,
That's hard on kids that age.
It's
Yeah.
you become very, I guess, you adjust quite easily to it. You have to, you know. So it has that advantage, I believe. I think that they find that ministers' kids do adapt quite easily.
Ah.
There's quite a lot of research been done on that.
Mm-hmm. And you had to.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
you
right.
don't have much of a choice.
Yeah. And then, as I recall, you went to University of Wisconsin in Madison, didn't you?
Went to first when I got out of high school. I worked for a couple of years, and then I went to Stevens Point, and I got a bachelor's degree at Stevens Point.
Uh-huh.
I went on from there, then later on, and went to the University of Wisconsin Graduate School and the University of Wisconsin Law School. Went to law school had 1 year of law at DePaul University in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a UW Law alumnus.
And then where did you set up practice?
Well, the first job I had...
Now, by this time, you're married? No.
No.
Not yet?
No.
Okay.
I got a job...
So what year did you graduate then from law school?
1944.
Okay. So 3 years before you got married then you were...
Yeah. And I got a job at Portage, Wisconsin. And I was in Portage less than a year with a law firm, a really good law firm. It was my good fortune to work with people that I worked with. High-grade lawyers. Rogers and Owens was the name of the firm. It exists no longer. The partners died.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody to carry on. And though they, at the time that I left them, they wanted me to stay with them. But I was kind of an independent guy, and I wanted to set up my own practice, so I moved from there to Marshfield. And we were at Marshfield, and Elizabeth and I were at Marshfield, well, I was 10.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Including
So
the
did you
time
set up
before
your...
we were married.
Did you set up your own practice in Marshfield?
That's right.
Yeah. And did you have a specialty, or was general whatever walked in the door?
To begin with, pretty much what walked in the door. I had quite a lot of trial practice, and I got around the central part of the state and tried cases in several of the counties. But I had an office practice there too, where we handled land transfers and all kinds of stuff like that. As you say, anything that walked in the door, almost. It wasn't quite that bad, but later on, I became registered with the United States Patent Office. I had my undergraduate and graduate work was in technical stuff, and so I had a chemistry major and some physics and other scientific stuff. So put that all together, and with a lot of study, as Elizabeth helped me do, and I wrote the examination for registration in the United States Patent Office. The circumstances are almost comical how it happened. I had a client who had some inventions, and I got involved with these inventions there with this Marshfield client, a man who had some genius in him, and sufficiently so that I was working with a patent firm in Washington who were doing their patent work. But I started to draft the patent applications that they were filing, and I'd send them on to them. One day I got a telephone call from one of them. He said, "You should be filing these yourself. Write the examination."
Mm-hmm.
So Elizabeth was my tutor for a year or two, and wrote the exam, passed it. The rest, I guess, is history. I've been involved in patent work ever since, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Went to 3M.
a second. Let me. Now, in what respect did you tutor him,
I
Elizabeth?
just had old exams that we drilled him on.
So you quizzed him,
Yeah.
right? And by this time, had you had children yet, or not?
Yes.
Both children?
Yeah, we had both of them.
So you had 2 kids, and you probably still weren't working as a nurse then.
No,
You were
I didn't work.
taking care of the kids and drilling him.
Yeah, it was about the time that Mary was born
Uh-huh. And where was this again?
at Marshfield.
Marshfield. Okay. And you said you were there 10 years. And moved on to where then?
Pardon?
Where'd you go after Marshfield then?
White Bear Lake.
Oh, you did?
We moved to White Bear Lake. I went to work for Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company.
Mm-hmm. Doing what? Same thing, patent law?
I started in doing patent work. I was a patent attorney there, and we moved there in 1956. In 1960, I had an opportunity to move into the Office of General Counsel.
Bob, hang on one second. I need to change batteries here.
Okay.
Okay, we're back in business. Okay, Bob. So you said you'd gone to 3M. Let's start over on that.
Well, I worked as a patent attorney for the first 4 years that we were there.
Now, what year was this that you went to work for
1956, we moved there. 1960, I believe it was, that I had an opportunity to move into the Office of General Counsel. And so I moved into that area.
So you were on that 3M campus there that's in St. Paul?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And spent the rest of my career as a lawyer right there.
Mm-hmm.
Retired in 1976.
So you worked for them, what, 20 years? Yeah, about 20 years.
Right.
Yeah. And what was it like being in that big corporate structure after being out there on your own? You said you were independent.
Well, it was my good fortune to have the opportunity to be independent almost all the time I was there. I was, in a sense, kind of my own boss, you know. And so that I had an opportunity to do a lot of interesting things. I visited the law schools. I recruited and I hired the lawyers for a period of, 15 years, I guess, of the time that I was there. I personally hired them, picked them out. We were at a point where we needed some special consideration in that area, and a particular type of new lawyer to be brought into the legal department. And so we hired these fellows right out of law school, and girls, hired some women. And it was my privilege to interview hundreds of candidates and to select the ones that I thought we should be carrying on with and building the department with. And it has worked out that way. It worked out very well.
Now, how big was the legal department?
At that time, oh, we had probably 8. Now they have 47. In that department, they have over 100 patent attorneys. But in general corporate law, they have 47.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a,
So it sounds like you enjoyed that.
I
Yeah.
had a good time, very much. I enjoyed it.
Now, how old were you when you retired?
65.
You were.
We are now 90 and 87.
You are.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have guessed it. I sure wouldn't have guessed it. No.
Yep, I'm 90.
You're both very vital, and you know. My mother's going to be 81. She's doing fine, but
Well, good for her. Just
Yeah.
a girl.
yes, that's right. So who's the eldest here then? You are, Bob, right?
Yep.
Let's turn back to Bayfield now. In fact, and you can both join in. Let me change the shot here to have you both in the picture. You've seen a lot of changes in Bayfield in 25 years that you've been here.
We enumerated them once, and I think we came up with 30 things that were major differences than when we came.
Can you remember some of them?
Well, the swimming pool, the bank downtown,
Yeah, that was a kind of a ball park down there, a skating rink.
Where the Bremer Bank is now.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the canning factory was down there. That was a sizable institution.
So was that still in operation in '76?
No,
No.
no. They had quit operating, but it was still standing there.
Mary removed that house on the parking lot, Maggie's parking lot. That was a wonderful contribution.
Improvement for the town.
Yeah.
This is needed to be done.
But in general, you've seen a lot of change in Bayfield.
Oh, yes.
You know, I mean, I've been coming here 20 years and only lived here 6, and I've seen, particularly even it's the last 5 or 6 years,
Sure.
a lot of change. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because the character of the town is changing, has changed.
Yes. Yeah, we noticed it in the first place. The absentee ownership of so many of these houses. The people occupy them maybe for 2 or 3 months a year. Some of them are essentially vacant the rest of the year. And there was probably a little bit of that when we came here, but nothing like there is today.
Improvement in housing, like this property across the street from us. And there
Oh, yeah.
are many places that are improved.
And bed and breakfast places have really multiplied. I can't remember any that were operating as bed and breakfast places when we came here.
Mm-hmm.
The Cooper Hill house it wasn't long before that was made into a bed and breakfast, and I'm trying to think of,
What about the Rittenhouse?
the Rittenhouse
that's the one
was
we
just
made
in
you.
that process.
What the Rittenhouse has brought to Bayfield, it's kind of a turning point.
Yeah,
So that was just starting when you moved up here.
Yes, they came about the same time we did. They put his $500 under the door.
What do you mean?
Well, the story is that Jerry put $500 under the door, and It was a down payment on the wooden house. and then left town. They were just up here on their honeymoon or something, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful story.
Yeah. Because he was in Madison, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.